All right. Good morning, everybody. We had a couple technical difficulties here. Getting started a couple minutes late. Welcome, welcome. Glad you're joining us. It is a beautiful sunshiny day here in South Dakota. Scott, Dr. Scott, hello. Good morning. How are
Yeah,
you
good
in your
morning.
neck of the woods?
Santa Barbara is awesome. It's nice. It's
Yeah.
of course sunshiny. It always is.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if you're joining us this morning, welcome. And if you want to hop in the chat quick, I would love to have you say hello. Tell us how you're doing, where you're from, and also tell us something fun and different that you've been experiencing or doing in the last few weeks since we've been on this stay-at-home initiative.
Yeah, my son and I went for a hike up in the mountains it's called the Grass Mountain Hike. It's a really difficult, really super steep hike. And hardly anybody ever goes on this hike. And we went there, man, there were so many people and their dogs and their kids. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of people hiking up in the mountains.
Yeah.
I also noticed like families, because it's just the family and nobody else out like in a field kicking a soccer ball around and stuff like that. Stuff like that. I think that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's interesting. The parks in Sioux Falls have been closed, and school playgrounds, and there's signs up and different things and talking about it. So it's like, well, where are people going to be able to go to, run around and stuff and just get some fresh air? All right, so welcome, Ray. Let's see. Good to see you, Ray, and thanks for joining us live today. So he said he's watched some of our YouTube videos, so everybody joining us live, we love to, so let me just do a little bit of welcome and introduction. This is the Diabetes Reversal webinar. I'm your host, Joe Barton with Barton Publishing, and our medical advisor, Dr. Scott Saunders, really leads this call and gets into the good information. Our goal with this webinar is to connect with our customers who have purchased the Diabetes Solution Kit, which looks like this. And so if you're familiar with this, that's probably how you got introduced to Barton Publishing. And if not, we list all of our products on bartonwebinar.com, or we link to our products, so it's all from there. But the reason we do this call is we like to help people, and that's one of our core values, is helping people. And we want to answer your questions. So as you're going through the journey of reversing type 2 diabetes, a lot of questions come up about what you can eat, what you can't eat, different types of medications and how to reduce them, and different factors that play a role. And so the last few weeks we've been talking about stress and the immune system, which is really important. And today we're going to be talking about inflammation, and a lot of these are connected, but we share a lot of good information. Dr. Saunders has years of experience helping people, and so Scott, would like to turn it over to you and get us rolling today and talk about diabetes and inflammation.
Okay. People have often asked if there's a relationship between diabetes and inflammation. And the diabetes by itself, just having a high blood sugar, doesn't necessarily cause inflammation. But there are a lot of other aspects that do. So when we become resistant to like cortisol, where our cortisol is elevated over time, that increases our risk for diabetes and it increases our risk for inflammation. So they often go together. So there are many who have diabetes who also have inflammation. And the reasons are really interesting. I don't know if anybody else is interested. I was a microbiologist before I went to medical school. And I always want to know, what's the bottom line? What's going on here? And a lot of what's happening is as we increase the amount of fat on our bodies, we produce hormones that increase the chances of inflammation. We become more resistant to the hormones that shut off inflammation. So we have two aspects. One is that we're no longer suppressing inflammation and we're making more inflammation. You have to think of it kind of like driving a car. When you're driving your car, you're creating heat in the engine. that's like inflammation. So the heat in our bodies is like inflammation. It's hot, it's running hot. If you run your car on nitromethane, it's going to get really hot. That's a super high octane fuel. It burns super hot, and you don't expect the engine to last more than a few thousand miles. Whereas if you're running an engine on diesel fuel is an oil, it's fuel oil. It's the same thing jet engines use, and actually burns kind of cold compared to other fuels. And you can run a diesel engine for 1 million miles. They run and they just keep going. I have a tractor that has, I don't know, the hours have flipped around a couple times, and that little diesel engine is still going. It's a tractor from the 1970s, and it's still going. And that's kind of the way diabetes is. If you have a constantly burning sugar, and all you can burn is sugar, you have high sugar all the time, and this constant sugar burning 24 hours a day, you're continually making oxygen-free radicals. And that's what creates part of the inflammation in the body. So we have hormones that aren't suppressing inflammation. We have other hormones that are producing inflammation, and we're burning a fuel that creates extra oxygen-free radicals and is burning us hot. So our hot meaning like free radicals. We're creating damaging DNA and damaging the mitochondria that make the energy for us, because we don't have enough antioxidants to suppress all of that oxidation. So for all of those reasons, and a few more, actually, can I tell you one more? This is actually very interesting. One of the problems with having a constant high blood sugar is we don't get rid of cells that are dead. And so these dead cells are all over the place inside of our body, and they just sit there. And it's kind of like having dead bodies laying around on your property. I went to Utah one time and went back to see my family. When I came home, the cats had killed something in the house. And the way I knew is that there was fur everywhere, little bits of fur everywhere, and there was blood spots. And I'm like, all this blood and fur, the cats have dragged something in. And cats don't eat the whole animal. They just eat parts of it. They just eat like the muscle. They're not like dogs. Dogs will eat the whole thing, but cats will just eat the meat and nothing else. So I knew there was a carcass around somewhere, but I couldn't find it. And I knew that I was going to have to wait till it started stinking, and then I was gonna find that carcass. Well, your body's kind of like that. You have these dead cells all over the place, and they're not getting used up. They're not getting taken out. So they stay there and they start stinking, and they start producing inflammation. So it's another source of inflammation from people who have diabetes. With all of that, you'd think, oh my gosh, I must be hot for all this inflammation, and often that's the case. But when fish oil is given to people who are low in omega-3 oils, and they give them a lot of omega-3 oils, a lot of the symptoms from inflammation will resolve, because it changes the hormones that balance. It balances the hormones that create inflammation versus the ones that produce inflammation. And because of that, a lot of people feel better. And that's just one aspect of inflammation in diabetes. So that's like the big picture of why there's so much inflammation going on, why people with diabetes are more likely to get Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, cancer, joint replacements. All of that is due to inflammation. Amazing, isn't it? Can't hear you, Joe.
Probably because I muted myself. How's that?
Funny how that works.
Well, that's good information. So seems how we are in the strangest time period of my life with the coronavirus stuff going on. I know that there's a connection with inflammation. Can you talk about inflammation and viruses and the coronavirus and things like that, and how they are connected?
Okay, that's a great topic. The viruses themselves don't create inflammation. The viruses merely are reproducing. They're not doing anything. The body reacts to the presence of the virus. And so it's not like making a toxin that's destroying anything. All it is reproducing. So the virus goes into the cell and then reproduces a whole bunch of new viruses, and then the cell breaks open and all these new viruses go out all over the place, and then they get into a new cell, and then they make new viruses and go out, and this is happening over and over again, such that you will get, when they measure the amount of viruses, when you're doing a COVID test, for example, they're measuring the number of copies of DNA in a cubic millimeter of blood, or a cubic centimeter of blood, yeah. So they're measuring thousands of copies of DNA in this much blood. That's how many viruses there are. The immune system can clean all this up, no problem. It's going to take a couple of weeks. It's going to all clean up, no problem. But some people have a very strong reaction to the presence of the virus. So part of it is the cells rupturing open and releasing their contents and the reaction that the body has. And so it's not, the inflammation from the infection is not just the virus, it's the way we react, it's our response to the virus. So some people will have the same infection. Children, for example, rarely get a strong response to a coronavirus. In fact, the deaths from children are slim to none, and the reports are questionable as to whether any children have died from the coronavirus at all, because they don't get the reaction. As people get older, they respond differently, they react differently, possibly slower at first, allowing the virus to get to invade more of the cells in their lungs especially. And then this big reaction comes on that creates what we call respiratory distress syndrome, which is not the virus, it's the body's reaction to it. So just stop reacting and you'll be fine. No. So, and that's why we use things to suppress inflammation. That's why we use things like fish oil suppresses inflammation, and turmeric, in order to decrease the body's overreaction to the presence of the virus.
So can you talk about how, like, inflammation in itself isn't bad? Like, we need some amount of inflammation. That's just a normal part of our body, but it's when there's too much inflammation, right? That's going on, that's kind of the problem.
Right. There needs to be a balance. In fact, if you suppress inflammation too much, then the virus can overwhelm your body completely. Or things like cancer. You need inflammation to get rid of cancer. If you don't have any inflammation, if you take away all your inflammation, then you'll be overcome by infection, or you'll be overcome by cancer. Your body won't be able to respond to threats, to problems that have to be resolved. So that's an important part of it too, that we need inflammation. There was one study that kind of questioned whether you should take so much fish oil, or how much omega-3, that there has to be a balance. Omega-6 oils mostly make inflammatory mediators, things that cause inflammation, whereas omega-3 oils tend to suppress inflammation. And so there's a balance there. And if you have too much suppression of inflammation, then you may get more cancer. So taking too much fish oil and not getting enough of the omega-6 oils, you can end up with cancer. There was one research study that showed that may be a possibility. So you have to be careful that number one, we need it. Number two, we don't want too much of it. So balancing.
How do you measure that? How do you measure inflammation and know if you're in the right area or if you have too much or not enough?
Excellent question. We use inflammatory markers. So if you've ever had like a CRP, C-reactive protein, is a marker for inflammation. And then the old one is a sedimentation rate, and that's still useful. We use it all the time, and that's more of a marker for systemic inflammation like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, rheumatic types of conditions. CRP is like anything. You could get allergies and CRP goes up. So any kind of inflammation. If you have gum disease, your CRP will be elevated. If you have heart disease or inflammation in your arteries, it'll go up. So often when you do a CRP test, the lab will say as a marker for cardiovascular disease, but it's actually much more broad than that. Cardiovascular disease is one aspect of it, but it's definitely not the whole thing. So we use inflammatory markers.
And what are some like symptoms, or how does the average person, how can they tell if they have too much inflammation just at home? Like, what are some of the symptoms or markers of that?
Oh, the easiest thing is arthritis, skin rashes, skin problems like psoriasis or eczema, even dandruff is a marker for inflammation. Some people get rhinitis, where their nose is running all the time. That's a marker for inflammation. Some people have what's called blepharitis, where their eyes are inflamed all the time. That's a marker for inflammation. Arthritis in joints, any joints, there's different types of arthritis, but all types of arthritis are good markers for inflammation, because almost any other type of inflammation will also produce arthritis. So those are great ways.
How about sore or stiff muscles? Is that really connected to that?
It can be, but most of the time it's not.
Okay.
And that's really interesting. Sore or stiff muscles mostly come from a lack of circulation, a blood circulation problem, where you don't get enough blood, enough nutrients to the muscles, so they don't relax very easily. They tend to spasm easily, at least areas and parts of them, which can be painful. But like people with fibromyalgia, they measure inflammation. They're always negative. They look normal, and they've got all this, no way, I'm in so much pain. But it's not inflammatory pain. It is, it's spasms, and there's other causes for it.
Yeah. Can you switch over now, like, to talk about like how do we keep our inflammatory levels at healthy, and like what do we eat? What are some other remedies or things we can be taking that help with inflammation?
Okay. Balance. If you just think of one thing, think balance. You like I said with the fish oil, you want fish oil. In fact, you want a good balance of omega-3 to omega-6. So if you are eating a lot of, fried foods, using vegetable oils, corn oils, you're getting a lot of omega-6 oils, which create inflammation. So we're always told, well, you better take fish oil to balance that, because it's really hard to get omega-3s if you're not eating fish. But for people who are vegan, they also get omega-3s, but they get it in seeds and nuts. So like walnuts have omega-3s at pretty high levels. Most nuts have some omega-3 oils. Walnuts and flax seeds and hemp seeds are decent ways to get omega-3 type oils. So that's one part, like the eating, balancing your oils, that's one balance. Another balance is getting fruits and vegetables so that you feed good bacteria in your intestines. Your intestinal bacteria has a lot to do with inflammation. If you have bad bacteria, which doesn't mean you have bad bacteria, it means your good bacteria has overgrown to the point where it's become a bad bacteria, sort of pathogenic. And if you're feeding them simple sugars and proteins, amino acids, and fats, then you're going to get certain bacteria in your intestines that are pro-inflammatory. They create inflammation. Whereas if you're giving prebiotics, then you're going to grow bacteria in your intestines that suppress inflammation. So what you eat is actually really important for how much inflammation you have.
Good. Leslie, I'll give you a little warning. I'm going to ask you in a couple minutes here for any questions that have come up on Facebook or on the side here. In the meantime, I'm going to ask the question that Larry had, which is connected to food. Larry says he travels a great deal for work and often weeks at a time. And it sounds like he struggles staying on the low carb 20 grams diet when he's traveling, eating out at restaurants, and probably now eating drive-through restaurants since you can't eat in restaurants right now. So what are some tips you can give to Larry and others that eat out a lot?
If you use the guidelines of what to eat, then you make choices based on that. So for example, if you're doing the 20 grams and you show up at a McDonald's and you say, okay, I want a hamburger with a lettuce wrap hamburger or something like that, then that'll meet your needs. You can choose a salad and then say, put the dressing on the side, and you don't have to use the salad dressing. You can just put vinegar and oil on it, for example. And when you order depending on the restaurant, getting a salad or getting a vegetable plate, I've often done that where they didn't have anything on the menu that I could eat. So I just order a vegetable plate and just, can I have some steamed vegetables? Even if it's not on the menu, they'll often have something like that. So in those ways, you can choose what to eat. And then the other thing you can do while traveling is you can have guidelines for when you eat and just say, okay, I'm going to have this window of between 7 and 7 a.m. and 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that actually keeps you ketogenic a lot easier if you stop eating earlier in the afternoon and just say, that's all. I'm done after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So what you eat, when you eat, and then how much you eat. And, as you're going through this, you're looking at carb counts, and you know how to count carbs now. So you're looking at it and you're going, no, that's too high in carbs. I can't have those potato chips. That's not going to work for me. And choosing the eggs instead of the oatmeal for breakfast, those kinds of things. And then if that's all there is, you can just say no and say, I can just skip the meal. That's okay. That's perfectly okay.
Yeah. Yep. Good. All right, Leslie, I'm going to turn it over to you now. And if you could tell our viewers about the 610 Reset Facebook group, and then if you have any other questions that came in, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. So first of all, I am seeing some comments. Ray had said he had seen us on YouTube. He's never actually been on one of our webinars live. So welcome. We're so glad that you found us. Those of you who haven't seen our YouTube channel, you want to make sure you check that out because all of our weekly webinars are posted there. And it just is a really good resource, especially for those of you who may have some extra time on your hands right now. It's a great time to get educated about a few things. So you can find a link to our YouTube channel by going to bartonwebinar.com. I actually just posted that in the chat. If you're watching on Facebook, that is also posted on the Facebook page as well. If you go to the pin post, you can see that. But Barton Webinar will give you a lot of information about many of the things that we talk about on our webinars. We'll give you the link to YouTube, etc. So check that out. Joe had mentioned our 610 Reset group, and there is a link to that on the Barton Webinar page as well. That is kind of a small private group that we've created to really kind of walk through some of these things together. You can ask questions there. We will do our best, of course, to answer those. You can find one of the webinars. We talked about how the 610 Reset works. This is something that Dr. Saunders actually presented to us, I guess a few months ago when we were on a trip in Utah, talking about how your body can really, really heal itself by following certain protocols. So 610 Reset group is where you can find more information about that. Join that on Facebook, pretty easy, 610 Reset. But you can get there from bartonwebinar.com. So head there, and we'd love to have you there. Say hello when you join. You have to approve it, but yes, post a message there so we know that you found it. Okay, questions. Let's see. Janice, oh, I love this. In the beginning, for those of you who are just hopping on now, Joe asked us, what are some things we've been able to do now that we may have some more time at home? And Janice said she has been doing lots of counted cross stitch, so that's fun.
Say that again. It's cut out a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Janice from Colorado has been doing cross stitch with her.
Cross stitch. Ah,
Yes.
okay. Very good.
I'm just going to scroll through some of these. And if you're on Facebook, feel free to ask questions. This is a really good opportunity for you to get those questions answered by Dr. Saunders. Let's see. Jane in Wales here. She's having a different experience of Holy Week this year via live streaming, but at least she's not completely cut off from participating, even though all the churches there are locked against us, she said. I know there have been some really amazing things that have happened online through all of this. I feel like I have more access to people and churches and things than I've had in a long time. So there's been some really good things from this. I'm glad you're able to take advantage of that, Jane. Skip wants to know, Skip, how are you? Last time, I think you were listening from the hospital, maybe. How are you doing, Skip? He's wondering if he can combine his heart and diabetes diets. I'm going to guess that would depend on what your heart diet is, but I'll let Dr. Saunders kind of address that.
Okay, so the heart diet is often something like a Mediterranean diet is what most do. There is another diet that is like the Esselstyn or the Dean Ornish diet. Those are the ones that are zero fat diets. And so here we have like the Dean Ornish diet, no fat, and then the diabetes reversal kit that we have has no carbs and go ahead and eat fat. So these are like conflicting often. People often think, oh my gosh, this is conflicting. And here's the funny thing about it is either one of them, when you cut out one type of calorie, it works. So even Dr. I don't remember which one it was, but someone that had the same, like Dr. Ornish, he had done some research on diabetes with zero fat diets and no processed carbohydrates. So that was the other thing is they could eat beans and whole grains and fruit so that they had a lot of sugar. But that still, diabetes improved on that kind of a diet. So it isn't that it has to be one or the other. It's the way we've chosen to do it is because most Americans are high in carbohydrates and they have a lot of sugar stored in their bodies. The first thing we want to do in phase one is get all that sugar out, clean it out. And so that's why we do the low carbohydrate diet and the low fat.
Okay, that's good. Here's another question from Ray, and we did talk a little bit about this, but I think it's so important. Let's see, are type 2 diabetics more susceptible to getting COVID-19?
To getting it, not necessarily, but to getting complications from it and having more inflammation and the lungs filling up with inflammation and filling up with fluid and not being able to breathe, yes. So the chances of getting complications are greater, but actually getting the disease, no. Everybody's pretty much equally susceptible to getting it, even children, even animals. On our farm, we had 6 horses got it. So they can spread around.
I just saw, I believe a tiger was just diagnosed in a zoo somewhere. I think I saw that yesterday on social media. Okay, let's see here. Shoba had a question. Let me find this. Will algae also suppress inflammation? Not everyone can take fish oil.
Oh, yes. Algae is anti-inflammatory to some extent. It does have some omega-3 oils, and that's part of it. But there are other things that it does. It gets rid of toxins in the body. It adds in certain things like iodine. And so in one way, so I talked about the various ways that inflammation comes in diabetes, and the algae helps in one or two of those ways. But yes, it can help.
Okay, these are good questions, guys. Keep them coming. Let's see. Are the several trigger fingers, this is from Gordon, are the several trigger fingers I've experienced connected to the diabetes I've just learned about?
Okay, good question. Okay, so here's the thing about this is inflammation anywhere in the body affects inflammation everywhere in the body. So just because you have, when they did studies on heart disease and they said, wow, people who have gum disease have a higher risk of heart disease. And it was a better correlation than even cholesterol. We all worry about cholesterol. Oh my gosh, my cholesterol's high. And we don't say, wait a minute, there is a better correlation with gum disease and heart disease than there is with cholesterol and heart disease. That's because of inflammation. So inflammation anywhere in your body affects it everywhere. So people who have the possibility of trigger fingers, and I actually have what's called Dupuytren's contracture, which is a genetically related illness, like in Germanic peoples. But if there's inflammation anywhere in the body, you're going to be more likely to get that. So because of the diabetes, you have more inflammation. Because you have more inflammation, wherever your weakness is going to show up more. So things like the trigger fingers, yes. So it's not a direct, it's an indirect correlation, but yes, there is.
I got to ask quick, what is a trigger finger?
Oh, a trigger finger is when the finger locks, like you can only bend it this far and it stops, and then it goes, and then it has a click, and then it clicks into place.
Okay.
Instead of going smoothly, it locks and then clicks. And what it is there's a little cyst that forms on the tendon, and the tendon has the tendons are in a track, and these ligaments that hold it in the track, if there's a little bump on it, it'll lock onto that ligament, and then it'll pop through when you put more pressure on it. That's the trigger finger.
Okay. I think I can do that, like with this finger. Hey.
Hey.
Good stuff. All right. I'll continue and sit back and listen. You're doing great, Leslie. Thank you.
These are good questions. This is easy. Okay. Let me see. Ray is wondering, are yoga and spinning at home? Wait, is yoga and spinning at home? Does it help your blood sugar levels, or should I be doing more lifting of weights and body weight? Also, how many days can I fast that is safe?
Okay, two questions. Number one, exercise. Any kind of exercise you do is good for your blood sugar. So we were asked once in a conference, what is the best exercise you can do for blood sugar? And people have, raised their hands, and they have all these answers for it. And he said, no. And everybody's like, okay, what is it? And it's the one that you love to do. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to do it. And so if you say, well, you have to be, lifting weights. But if I tell you have to lift weights and you say, I don't like lifting weights, then you're not going to lift weights, and you're going to go, well, I can't exercise. I can't do anything. It's not helpful if you're not doing it. Yoga is great. Tai Chi is great. Walking is great. Going to the gym and pumping iron and building up big muscles, that's great too. So the one that you do is great. Okay, that's question one. Question number two is
how many days is it safe to fast?
Days. Okay. So safety. The safest way to look at this is to fast till you get to your ideal body weight. And it's about 1 day per pound. So I had somebody who was 50 pounds overweight, and he did 30 days of just drinking bone broth, and he lost 33 pounds. And that was clearly within his safety zone. And his diabetes went away completely. Like, we tested everything, even his hemoglobin A1C, everything, all tested normal, like he didn't have diabetes. In only 1 month, he was cured. So, and I hate to use the word cured, he was reversed, put it that way. So he didn't have it anymore. But he could get it back if he like gained the weight back. So 1 day per pound. So if you say my current body weight is 180 pounds and I'm perfect at 150 pounds, that means you can go 30 days. What's really cool about that is you don't have to do it 30 days in a row. You can, but you don't have to. You can do 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 10 times, and that's your 30 days. And that works too. It's great.
As long as you don't eat twice as many calories on the off days, right?
Well, maybe, but you know what? It's not that easy, because most people, if you fast for 3 days, your stomach kind of shrinks and you don't eat as much. You're not as hungry all the time. Mm-hmm. And so if you do if you do the 30 days and get down to your ideal body weight, you don't gain it back that easily.
You know, speaking of fasting, like on Sunday, I turned off my phone. Actually, I just did not ever turn on my phone all day Sunday, and I avoided all screens, no computers, no TVs, and it was so refreshing. Like I detoxed, and it was a good exercise to do, just because I realized how attached I was to screens and how much I depended on them. And like, especially right now with all the coronavirus stuff in the media, like just to take 1 day and take a break, it's like a Sabbath. Like, you know, maybe there's a reason God had us, it says keep holy the Sabbath day. Like that might actually be really good for us. But I just wanted to encourage people to do that. And if you add, like, I mean, there's many things you can fast from besides just food and beverages or whatever, but also from, media and negative energy things and things like that. So I don't know. I just thought I'd share that quick, and it was very beneficial for me, kind of like a reset. So.
I have several patients who come in and ask me about, well, you know, what can I give up for Lent when they're doing a 40-day fast from something. And so we talk about things like media, but since I'm into health, it's usually about food. And I say, well, do something like a sugar fast for 40 days, you know, or give up gluten for 40 days, or give up, you know, what's your favorite vice? You know, whether it's smoking or sugar candy or buy chocolate or coffee. I've had several people say, I gave up coffee for Lent. It was horrible. But yeah, fasting is really good for you no matter how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
Okay, we have a lot of other questions that are coming in, so we'll try to get to as many of these as we can. One thing I was going to mention too, I'm finding that a lot of like athletic clubs are doing free Facebook Lives, so you can do workouts and stuff for free. So it's a really good time to take advantage of some of those things, try some new things. You know, maybe you'll enjoy Zumba or you know, strength training class, or we just did a Pilates class the other day online, and they're really fun. You can find out, you know, some different things that you may like and enjoy. And I like to mix it up. Keeps it fun for me. So take advantage of those things while they're free. Let's see. Okay, Pat says, good morning. What are your suggestions for supplements during this COVID-19 pandemic? Thanks and blessings.
Okay. Yeah, we talked about that on a previous one. Let's reiterate the ones. Vitamin D is very important for your immune system. So if you don't have enough vitamin D, you are more susceptible to viruses, cancer, infections of all kinds. The cellular immune function is not activated until you get enough vitamin D. That's why there's a seasonal flu, because during the winter, we don't get vitamin D from the sun. During the summer, we do. That's why you don't see flu during the summer. So vitamin D, okay, how much? Everybody's asking how much. And for an adult, it should be between 5 and 10,000 units a day. Children between 2 and 5,000 units a day. So if those are sort of the ranges. If you know your level, if you're doing tests, your optimum level is 70 to 90. That's the optimum level. Up to 100 is okay. Down to 60 is okay. Those are the okay range. 70 to 90 is optimal. So if you're actually getting blood tests and you ask your doctor, hey, can I do a vitamin D test to see if your supplement is giving you enough vitamin D? So that's one. Number 2 is zinc. Without zinc, the immune system does not function, number 1. Number 2, when you have enough zinc, it prevents viruses from entering the cells. So even now, when people are already infected, they already have pneumonia, they give them hydroxychloroquine with zinc. And that seems to be the most effective way to even suppress and get rid of the virus if you already have it. But keeping enough zinc in your body will help as well. Number 3, vitamin C. Oh, zinc, I didn't tell you how much. So zinc should be around 50 milligrams a day. Don't take it every day. Take it every day. Don't take it every day. Take it every day. Take it every day for about 90 days. And then after 90 days, take a double dose once a week. Because if you take zinc all the time, you inhibit copper, and copper is necessary for a lot of other functions in your body. So zinc, and then vitamin C. We often talk about vitamin C, and people get inadequate amounts of vitamin C. According to many studies that have been done, vitamin C is very helpful for immune function and suppressing inflammation. And then several other supplements can be helpful. Turmeric can be helpful, but don't take it every day. Take it 5 days on, 2 days off. Because if you take it every day, then the inflammatory effects aren't very worthwhile. So you see these conflicting studies that say, wow, turmeric's amazing, it does all these amazing things. And then other studies that go, well, it doesn't really do anything. And it depends on how it's taken too, and what it's taken with. You need some black pepper with it in order to absorb the curcumin well. So a good quality turmeric that you take 5 days on, 2 days off is a good way to during this time to keep your inflammation down. And then getting enough of the omega-3 oils that we already talked about. And the amount of that would be around 1 gram a day is usually gets a pretty good balance of omega-3 to omega-6.
Can you talk about iodine quick? Is that helpful?
Iodine is so important. And you know what? Where you live, Joe, iodine is deficient in the soil. So all of the foods that are grown in your area don't have iodine in them. They did a study about over 15 years ago on high school girls in the Midwest, and I think it was Michigan. And they said 12% of these high school girls already had goiter from iodine deficiency at that young age. So, and everybody thinks they're getting iodine from the salt, but unless you buy salt that says iodized, it doesn't have iodine in it. So when you go to, open a can of something with salt in it, that doesn't have any. If you go to a restaurant, there's no iodine in that. So often we have to take a supplement of iodine. And the amount that you take, around 10 milligrams a week seems to be plenty, is a good way to do it.
So I heard iodine was really effective at fighting viruses, especially some research that came out about 10 years ago with SARS and H1N1, I believe. And I was just thinking about too, like when surgeons, you see them, pre-surgery, they're washing their hands with an iodine type of a soap. And,
yes.
That made sense, I guess, when I thought about that.
Yeah, there is no organism resistant to iodine. And chlorine as well. Iodine, chlorine, fluorine, those are all in the same chemical structure, chemical family. But chlorine can become toxic if we take too much of it, and bromine certainly is toxic, and fluorine certainly is toxic, but iodine is non-toxic. Okay. So that's why we can use iodine ad infinitum, well, and the body will excrete what we don't use.
Yeah. All right, we've got some more questions. Let's keep going here, Leslie. I didn't mean to sidetrack us there.
Wow, this is good. We have a lot of questions. I'm hoping we get to these, but guys, if we don't, let's address these next week too. So make sure you hop on our webinar next week and we'll do these questions. This is my, actually, I'm gonna take Eric's question from Facebook. What is the best source or supplier for bone broth?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know. You know, I go to Costco. They have a box of bone broth, organic bone broth. I went to Trader Joe's and I got some organic bone broth in the quart container, like cardboard containers. We had local suppliers, people that making bone broth and selling it locally in Santa Barbara. So I don't know what you have locally, but I've gotten it from various sources. You know what? I prefer making it myself. It's not hard to make. It's really easy. You just get bones. I get organic beef bones, and I like getting the beef shank because it has a lot of marrow in it. It does get it a little more greasy. Your broth is a little more greasy than what you buy in the store, but you know what? I like it that way. And then I spice it up really well, things that I like. So, you know, I'll put turmeric in it and make a curry type broth, or sometimes I'll put oregano in it and make an Italian type broth. And then sometimes I'll make a Mexican type broth with pepper in it. And I always put onions and garlic and celery. I found celery is what makes broth good. Without the celery, it's just kind of blah. I can drink it, but you know, I can sip it and taste it, and it's really good with celery.
And there are lots of recipes online, so just Google it. You can find a lot. I know some people are even making it in their Instant Pot, which is interesting. So, okay, this is from Mr. Kerry Clark. This is my first time on your webinar. I was diagnosed with diabetes in 2011 and have never taken any medicine. I'm very careful on what I eat, excuse me, and I'm keeping mostly below 150 and only have gone over 200 a couple of times. Is it possible to reverse diabetes? I am 85 years old.
Wow, good. An excellent question. So if you haven't been on medications and your blood sugar is in the hundreds to as high as 200 occasionally, then it's definitely reversible, because what that tells me is you're making insulin. And if you're making insulin, then you can reverse that. The problem, anyway, so you can reverse it. That's the answer to your question. So the question, how can you reverse it? Well, if you look at the diabetes solution kit and you do in phase 1, where you're cutting out almost all your carbohydrates and you're only getting 20 grams of carbohydrates a day, then what happens is you start burning fat. You use up all the sugar in your body and start burning fat. And that's what's the most helpful thing to begin with when you want to reverse diabetes.
Okay, here's another good question from Anne. I have COPD, diabetes, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol without meds for the cholesterol. Will using Dr. Saunders reversal help me in most of these health issues?
Okay, the cholesterol, yes. The diabetes, yes. The COPD, probably not. COPD is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's a lung problem where the lungs no longer function the way they used to. That instead of having a lot of little air sacs, they kind of break open into a larger air sacs, which makes the oxygen exchange is not as good as it used to be. So it's harder to get enough air. Even though you're breathing the same amount of breathing, as the blood goes through, it's not picking up oxygen as efficiently as it used to. So, so that's a different issue, and that should be dealt with in a different way of decreasing inflammation, is what we're talking about today. But the other two definitely will, going on that program will help those other two.
Let's take one more here, Leslie, and I see Ray has a good one regarding fasting that I think would probably be a good one to finish up on here. So, it's in the chat.
Okay. I am type 2. When I fast, should I stop the long-term and short-term insulin if my blood sugars are between 80 and 120, let's say?
Okay. If your blood sugars are between 80 and 120, you shouldn't be injecting insulin. If you're type 2 and you're injecting insulin, then what that means is you're resistant to insulin and you're adding on more insulin, which can make you more insulin resistant. So, so as your blood sugar gets below 150, you should be decreasing the insulin. And that's where you work with your doctor and start discussing how you're going to get off the insulin, because the number one most important thing is to get sensitive to the insulin that you have. So getting rid of insulin resistance is what phase 1 is all about. And so when you're injecting insulin, you're creating more insulin resistance. So getting off of the injections is a key component. So does fasting help that? Absolutely. If you start fasting and you're injecting insulin, you could drop your blood sugar way too low because you're not bringing in any sugar. So as soon as the body uses up the internal supply of sugar, your blood sugar can bottom out and you get hypoglycemia. So you want to avoid that. Don't get hypoglycemia. So don't inject insulin if your blood sugar is dropping below 120-ish or 150-ish, and if you're fasting, I would be very wary to even inject any insulin at all. And that's where you work with your doctor and say, how am I going to do this? And you could even do a test run where you fast without insulin and see where your blood sugar is. And that's often helpful.
Awesome. Well, hey, this has been a great call. A lot of good questions answered and asked, and we didn't get to all of them, but a lot of these, like Leslie said earlier, we have on our YouTube channel. So if you can find us on YouTube, we're called Barton Publishing Webinars, I believe is the name of it. And if you subscribe on YouTube, you'll get notified of all the new videos that come in each week. And you can also find all of the other videos that we've posted. And we've posted probably close to 30 of them now, 30 weeks in a row that we've been doing this. And we love doing it because we get to interact with you guys and answer your questions, and we get a lot of positive feedback. And so Dr. Saunders, thanks again for joining us and helping us and helping people to stay positive in these times. And I just want to give an encouraging word to everybody watching too, like as you are staying home, see this as an opportunity to like get yourself in the best shape of your life. Like do everything you can that you know is right, like to eat healthy, to exercise, to be positive, to spend time with family and friends, distanced a bit, but still like don't give that up, like laugh and find positive ways to keep your immune system strong and your mood strong. And like this is a time I see this, you know, there's a lot of fear that's spread in the media, which is why I think we need to limit the media. But like focus on the positive things, find the things like the opportunities in this time to become, you know, the best version of yourself that you can. So and yeah, all of this stuff that Dr. Saunders has been teaching us about eating low carbs, minimizing inflammation, you're going to feel so much better, and you'll start building on things. Like you'll find a little win here that gets you to another level. And like by the end of another few weeks here, you might look back and say, man, this was a really good time in my life, that I got over some struggles and obstacles in my life and come out of this like your best ever. So I truly believe like this summer of 2020 is going to be awesome and amazing. And I think we're going to start to see the coronavirus tide turning soon. So I'm an optimist, and sometimes I get in trouble for that, but I'm not going to stop being an optimist. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next Tuesday at 10 a.m., Lord willing. And thanks, everyone. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, everyone, for
All
joining.
right. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.